Right now, while you're watching this, there are birds in your yard doing things they would never do in daylight. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., in that dead zone of night when even the owls go quiet, your backyard transforms into something most people will never witness. The cardinal that visits your feeder every morning at 8 a.m. is awake right now. Not just awake, active, moving through your yard in complete darkness, doing something that would stop you cold if you could see it. Most people assume birds sleep through the night, that they tuck into a branch at sunset and don't move again until dawn. But the reality is far stranger, far more specific, and in some cases genuinely unsettling. What happens in your yard between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. is one of the least observed windows of bird behavior that exists. And tonight, it's happening again. Welcome back to Bird Mind Theory. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave, because what you're about to learn happens every single night in your yard, completely invisible to you, and it will change the way you think about the birds you see every morning. Today, we're going into the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. window, the darkest, coldest, most vulnerable hours of the night, and we're going to walk through exactly what your birds are doing when they think no one is watching. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover is something researchers only documented in the past decade, and it involves a behavior so unexpected that it challenged assumptions ornithologists had held for generations. The answer is not what most people imagine, and it's different depending on which bird you're asking about. Let's start with the northern cardinal, the most recognized backyard bird in North America. At 2:37 a.m. on a January night, when the temperature is 18 degrees Fahrenheit, a male cardinal in your holly bush is not asleep. He is in a state called vigilant rest. One eye is closed, the other is open, not figuratively, literally open, scanning the branches around him in the dark. Research from the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology has documented that many bird species engage in what's called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep. One half of the brain enters deep sleep, while the other half remains awake and alert. The eye on that side of the head staying open and functional. The cardinal switches which side is asleep roughly every 20 to 30 minutes throughout the night. But here's what makes the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. window different. This is the coldest part of the night. Air temperature drops to its lowest point in the hours just before dawn. And during this window, the cardinal's metabolic demands are at their peak because his body is fighting to maintain core temperature in conditions that are actively trying to kill him. A cardinal weighs roughly 45 grams, about the weight of a golf ball. On a night when temperatures drop into the teens, that bird is burning through fat reserves at a rate that gives him maybe 12 to 14 hours of survival time without food. By 2 a.m., he has already been without food for 6 or 7 hours since the last feeding opportunity at dusk. His body is running a calculation in real time. If the night gets colder, if he burns through reserves faster than expected, he may not make it to morning. So here's what he does. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., cardinals and many other small songbirds engage in something called nocturnal torpor adjustment. It is not full torpor, which is a deeper hibernation-like state some species use. It is a controlled reduction in body temperature and metabolic rate, just enough to stretch existing fat reserves without dropping so low that the bird cannot respond to threats. According to research published in the Journal of Avian Biology, cardinals can lower their nighttime body temperature by 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit during the coldest hours, reducing energy expenditure by up to 10%, which in survival terms is the difference between waking up and not waking up. But while the cardinal is managing his internal thermostat, something else is happening in your yard that most people never think about. The chickadee in the woodpecker hole in your oak tree is doing something far more extreme. At 2:52 a.m., a black-capped chickadee weighing 11 grams, the weight of 2 pennies, has dropped its body temperature by 22 degrees Fahrenheit. Its heart rate, which during the day runs at 500 beats per minute, has slowed to under 200. It is not asleep in any sense we would recognize. It is closer to a controlled metabolic shutdown. This state, called regulated hypothermia, is one of the most remarkable physiological adaptations in North American birds. Without it, a chickadee could not survive a winter night in the northern United States. The energy required to maintain normal body temperature through a 12-hour winter night would exceed the fat reserves a bird that size can physically carry. But here's where it gets strange. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., chickadees in hypothermia are not completely unresponsive. Studies using infrared cameras and temperature sensors inside roosting cavities have shown that chickadees in deep hypothermia can still detect threats. A predator moving near the roost entrance, the scrape of claws on bark, the vibration of something large approaching, all of these can trigger what researchers call emergency arousal. The bird's metabolism spikes, body temperature climbs rapidly, and within 30 to 60 seconds, the chickadee is alert and capable of flight. The cost of that emergency arousal is enormous. It burns through fat reserves equivalent to an hour or more of normal nighttime metabolism. If it happens too many times in one night, the bird will not survive until morning. This is why the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. window is so critical. It is the period of deepest vulnerability, when disturbance is most dangerous, and when your yard needs to be as quiet and as safe as possible. Now let's talk about what's happening above your yard while the cardinals and chickadees are managing survival on the ground. At 3:14 a.m. on a night in mid-April, there are birds flying over your house, not one or two. On a peak migration night, the number of birds passing over a single point in the eastern United States between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. can reach into the hundreds of thousands. These are not owls. These are not nightjars. These are your birds, the thrushes, the warblers, the sparrows. The birds you will see in your yard in 2 weeks are passing over you right now in total darkness, navigating by stars and magnetic fields, flying at altitudes between 500 and 3,000 feet. Cornell Labs' Birdcast project, which uses weather radar to track nocturnal migration, has documented that the peak migration window for most small songbirds occurs between midnight and 4 a.m. Birds take off shortly after sunset, climb to cruising altitude, and fly through the night, covering distances of 200 to 400 miles before landing at dawn. The 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. window is the midpoint of that journey, the hours when the birds are farthest from both their departure point and their destination, fully committed to the crossing. Why do they migrate at night? Because daytime thermals and wind patterns make long-distance flight more energetically expensive, and because flying at night reduces exposure to daytime predators like hawks. But it also means that the birds are navigating in near-total darkness, relying on senses most humans don't even have. Research from the University of Oldenburg in Germany has shown that migratory birds can see the Earth's magnetic field. They perceive it visually through a protein in their eyes called cryptochrome, which allows them to literally see lines of magnetic force overlaid on the night sky. To a warbler flying over your house at 2:47 a.m., the world does not look dark. It looks like a glowing grid of orientation information we cannot begin to imagine. At the same time, birds are navigating using star patterns. On clear nights, research shows that birds use constellations as fixed reference points, recalibrating their direction throughout the night as the stars rotate. On cloudy nights when stars are not visible, birds rely more heavily on magnetic cues and, in some cases, landmarks they can perceive in infrared. The biological capacity required to do this, to fly for 6 or 7 hours in darkness while processing magnetic, celestial, and geographic information simultaneously, is so far beyond human capability that we are only beginning to understand how it works. But not every bird in your yard is asleep or migrating. Some of them are hunting. At 2:23 a.m., there is an eastern screech owl perched motionless on a branch 15 feet above your driveway. It has been there for 11 minutes, completely still, waiting. Screech owls are one of the most common nocturnal predators in suburban and rural yards, and the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. window is prime hunting time because it is the period when small mammals, the owl's primary prey, are most active. Mice, voles, shrews, all of these animals are crepuscular and nocturnal, meaning they are most active at dawn, dusk, and the middle of the night. The owl is waiting for movement. Its hearing is so acute that it can detect a mouse moving under 3 inches of snow from 30 feet away. Its eyes, which are fixed in their sockets and cannot move, are supported by a neck that can rotate 270 degrees, allowing the owl to scan without moving its body and giving away its position. When the owl strikes, it happens faster than you could process if you were standing there watching. The entire attack, from launch to impact, takes under 2 seconds. The flight is completely silent. Specialized feathers on the leading edge of the owl's wings break up airflow and eliminate the sound of wing beats, which is why owls are called silent predators. The mouse or vole on the ground has no audible warning. By the time it detects movement, it is already too late. For the sleeping birds in your yard, the presence of a screech owl is a constant background threat. Many small songbirds can hear the owl's soft territorial calls, a descending whinny that screech owls produce intermittently throughout the night. Those calls are being monitored by every chickadee, every cardinal, every bird in earshot, updating their assessment of how dangerous the night is and whether they need to increase vigilance or stay deep in torpor. And then there are the birds that, on certain nights between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., are doing something no one expected. Researchers studying American robins in urban and suburban environments discovered something in the early 2000s that initially seemed like a data error. Robins were singing at 2:30 in the morning, not pre-dawn singing, which starts around 4:30 or 5 a.m., depending on the season. Full territorial song in the middle of the night. It took years to figure out why. The answer is artificial light. Robins are highly responsive to light levels, and in neighborhoods with street lights, porch lights, and security lights, the ambient light pollution is enough to trigger the hormonal response that initiates dawn song. Research published in the journal Current Biology found that robins in well-lit urban areas regularly begin singing between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., hours before any natural light appears. To the robin, the streetlight outside your house is functionally indistinguishable from early dawn. Its circadian rhythm has been hijacked. The bird thinks morning has arrived, and it responds accordingly. This is not harmless. Singing burns energy. Singing at 2 a.m., when the bird should be conserving energy to survive the coldest part of the night, forces the robin to burn fat reserves it may not be able to replace before the real dawn arrives. Birds in heavily light-polluted areas show measurably lower body weights and higher stress hormone levels than birds in darker areas. The 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. singing you hear in your neighborhood, if you live in a suburban or urban area, is not a bird that is thriving. It is a bird whose biology is being disrupted by an environment it did not evolve to handle. If you have ever heard a robin singing at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning and thought it was charming, I want you to sit with this. That bird is confused. It is burning energy it cannot afford to burn, and it is happening because of light we installed. So what does all of this mean for your yard? It means that the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. window is not empty. It is not silent. It is not inactive. It is a window of extreme vulnerability, extraordinary adaptation, and behavior that most people will go their entire lives without witnessing. The cardinal in your holly bush is awake, managing his body temperature degree by degree to survive until dawn. The chickadee in the oak is in controlled hypothermia, hovering at the edge of consciousness, burning the absolute minimum energy required to stay alive. Above your house, warblers are flying south in darkness, navigating by stars and magnetic fields you cannot see. In the branches, a screech owl is hunting. And in the streetlight, 2 houses down, a robin is singing a song that should not start for another 2.5 hours. You have been living next to this for years without knowing it was happening. Now you know. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been awake between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. and heard something in your yard that surprised you? A bird call? Movement? Something you couldn't explain? I want to hear about it. I read everyone. I'll see you in the next one.